Welcome to Siliconsciousness, the DSR Network podcast focusing on the artificial intelligence revolution, politics, and policy.
This podcast is underwritten in part by the U.S. Embassy of the United Arab Emirates. Its editorial content is completely independent, and the views expressed are exclusively those of participating experts. It is presented live, without editing. For further information about the UAE's efforts in the areas of artificial intelligence and technology, go to the website of the embassy at www.uae-embassy.org and search for UAE-US Tech Cooperation. We thank them for their support. We thank everybody who's supporting this podcast for their support, and we look forward to it developing and growing over time because the issue is so important. Hello and welcome to Siliconsciousness. I'm your host, David Rothkopf. And this week, as every week, we're going to talk about some dimension of the revolution in artificial intelligence. And today we're going to talk about an aspect of artificial intelligence, applied artificial intelligence, that I think is particularly important and promising from somebody who is not just thinking about it, but who's doing it. Kristen DiCerbo is the Chief Learning Officer at Khan Academy, where she leads the content, product management, design, and customer support teams, most recently in the launch of Khanmigo, an AI-based tutor and teacher assistant. She was named to Time's AI 100 2024 list of people shaping the future of AI. Welcome, Kristen. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So I guess the place to start is what you're doing and what is Khanmigo?
Yes. So Khanmigo is, as we said, an AI-powered tutor for students. So that means a student's trying to solve a math problem. Khan Academy is well known for Sal's math videos and then the practice that goes with them. And kids get stuck. How do they get unstuck? Well, often in a classroom, they raise their hand and wait for the teacher to get to them, or they have to, if they're at home, they're talking to their friends, trying to figure this out, getting frustrated. Khanmigo can jump in and ask questions and say, hey, what have you tried? What do you think the next step might be? Walk students through trying to get unstuck. But largely, even if you're not working on a specific math problem, but thinking broadly across domains, can help students get more support in what they're working on and more immediate feedback. So apart from math, we also, for instance, have a writing coach. And if you think about the idea of writing in classrooms, so often students are working on their essay, they submit the essay, the teacher ends up with a huge stack of essays they need to grade on their evenings and weekends, and the student maybe gets their work back a week or two later, and there's a grade on the top that they look at, and then they kind of put it away. That's not how people learn. That's not good for learning. So if the AI can give that more immediate feedback as the student's writing, hey, that introduction, you might think about making it a little more interesting, add a couple grabby sentences in the front, that kind of feedback. Students are going to be able to improve quicker and be able to get more of that support that they need as they're working on that. So that's the student side, is thinking about how we get students more immediate support and feedback. On the teacher side, teachers spend a lot of their time doing lots of tasks that aren't teaching. So things like writing a class newsletter, which are great things that AI can help with. So we also have about 25 different tools for teachers to help them do some of those tasks that take their time away from teaching and working with students.
I'm going to start in a weird place here because I'm listening to this and I'm thinking of how this might work. And of course, as somebody who's written a bunch of books and writes articles all the time, I just envision the interaction with the AI assistant going something like, I'm writing, and it goes, do you really want to write that? But you know, but let's get my anxieties set it aside for a second. It's pretty easy to imagine how you could build some kind of AI powered assistant that could evaluate things on a factual basis. But a lot of the interaction between a student and a teacher is human. It's personal. It's tone of voice. It's a lot of nonverbal communication that helps the student through the moment or encourages the student to try harder and that kind of thing. What percentage of what you do with Conmigo is oriented towards the vibe as opposed to the facts?
No, it's a good question. And it's actually a deeper question actually than just a percentage, because the question is, how much do we want the AI to act like a human? How much do we want the student to form a relationship with the AI that helps them? And I will say our approach so far has been that we don't want that. And so Conmigo does not have a human name. Conmigo is an it. Conmigo is a thing, and we are not leaning into students trying to form a relationship with Conmigo and developing that. So most of what we are focused on is the academic side, is the light encouragement, but we actually have a phrase that we say that human high fives beat computer confetti. And it is still the case that getting a pat on the back from your teacher is always going to be better than the computer going, "Yay, good job." So this is more about negotiating what is the role of the teacher in the classroom and what is the role of the technology. And we don't think that the technology should try to take on too much of that human role in those relationships and building. But we do think there is a role that the technology can play on supporting the content and the content delivery and work.
Why? I mean, are you like? I've talked to a lot of people about AI in education, and there are a couple of schools of thought. Right? One of the schools is, oh yeah, AI can do this better than a teacher can. Because not all teachers are that great, first of all. And AI can, move as fast as the student wants, as long as the student wants, and so forth. And so, particularly in areas like language learning, there's a lot of options out there, and there's a lot of people going, yeah, no, we don't need the teachers. The AI will do the trick. Is the why because teachers are a little paranoid about this, or because you don't think it's good from a pedagogic perspective?
I don't think it's good from a pedagogical perspective to think that the computer can do it all. We have research that says if you think there's a human that cares about you in the school, you have better graduation rates, better post-secondary attendance. All of that piece of having that human is, we see the results of that and where that is. So we do think there's an important role there for teachers in classrooms. It does not necessarily have to be all about content delivery or support and feedback on the content, but there is an important piece there. So we don't think that this is a place where we're thinking we can just replace all of the teachers with AI.
Okay, well, let me break that down a little bit, because implicit in what you're saying is that there are some things that it might be better to work with the AI on, or just as good, and others where it would not be. Now, when you did your initial description, and when I've read about this, a lot of it talks about the AI is going to relieve the teacher of administrative duties. The AI is going to give the teacher more time for the kind of interpersonal reaction that makes sense. Is a natural extension of that to say, well, AI is good at running you through an exercise and possibly good at delivering content, but teachers are good at shaping how you think about that content and integrating the learning into the life of the student?
I would certainly agree with that. And there's that motivational piece you were getting at, which partly gets at integrating it into the life of the student. And when we talk about motivation, there's a kind of a basic motivational theory that's called expectancy value, which means you'll do things if one, you expect that you're going to be successful at them, and two, you value doing that thing. And so the teacher can help with both of those in thinking about how do you've got the student who says, I'm just not a math person. I can't do math. I'm not good at math. How do you start to change that? That's a tough thing to ask an AI to do, is to kind of change your mindset about how you're thinking about that. And what are the things that you value? What's going to make this valuable to you to learn this? Also, that's another difficult thing for an AI to work on. We do actually, but I will give a caveat that Convigo actually does have a canned question that students can click on that says, why should I learn this? And Convigo will ask, well, what are you interested in? And then relate that back to what they're doing. So at a surface level, it can do that. But the teacher in the classroom who has a 360-degree view of this child has a much broader view of what that is. Any particular AI is only going to have so much data about that student from which to work with.
Yeah, Khan Academy has been such a trailblazer in technology-assisted learning that, I have to imagine that at some point you're going off into the company cafeteria or someplace, and you're sitting there and you're speculating a little bit about the future of where this goes. And there are different kinds of applications that strike me as important. And I think Khan Academy has actually filled this role in some places. Having a really, really good teachers that teach very niche-y, sophisticated things is not something that every school system can deliver, right? And it says nothing against them, but if you want to get, a college level astrophysics course, then I know you're talking about other things, but you're not going to get that in town X with limited budget. And it may be better to say, well, look, we can make this available to you via this AI platform. Is that a direction you see this evolving?
Yeah, and so even before before Conmigo, we have our AP physics and chemistry and calculus courses. There are many schools that don't offer those courses, and there are now colleges and universities that accept mastery on the Khan Academy course that's verified as evidence that you've done that in high school. And so when they're looking at their admissions criteria, many of these top tech schools, require some high school level work on those courses, and students can use this as evidence to do that. So certainly that's one thing. The other thing is we keep talking about, how does this AI compare to a teacher? But there are globally many places in the world where it's the AI versus nothing. Like, is this better than having nothing? And I think we can, it's definitely better than nothing. And thinking about offering opportunities for folks, not even, astrophysics, but some, what we would consider standard high school courses to be offered. So we definitely think there's a place there for this technology to be a tutor in places where there's not access to good education.
I have to offer a parenthetical comment here, which you can offer a response to or not, but I just offer it up. I find this conversation kind of strangely moving. My dad was a pioneer of using computers to teach. He was the head of Learning Instructional Research Department at Bell Telephone Laboratories. And so he talked about in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s, teaching machines. And it was very, very rudimentary, right? And he developed a whole school of thought called mathemogenic behavior, how knowledge is created in people's minds. He also taught at Columbia. And one of the things that he said was, if you use this technology properly, it has strange effects that people do not necessarily expect. So, for example, it could enable somebody with slightly less education traditionally to do something rather sophisticated if they have the tool at their side. Now, when my dad was talking about this was kind of the 70s or the early 80s. He did a lot of work with the military as well as with Bell Labs. And one of the things he would say is somebody wants to go and fix something complicated like a locomotive, that they could look at a computer or a CD or whatever the technology was at the time, and it can walk you through it. And you just didn't need big chunks of the education. And this is resonant in the context of lifelong learning also. And I'm just wondering what you think of those applications and that kind of, sort of upside down insight that may result from this.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. There's so many things about that comment that I could comment on.
Well, take your pick.
I also am kind of a student of all of the history of these teaching machines. I start many times when I give presentations a picture of this teaching machine that was developed in 1925 by someone named Sidney Pressey, where there was a roll of paper that had multiple choice questions on it, and you would select an answer. But the best part of it was that if you got so many in a row right, there was a chute that would shoot candy out at you. So all of these kinds of early days of teaching machines and thinking about how we might move these forward are as a whole other side note of lots of different things to talk about there. But to your point about, I think, being able to be a lifelong learner, we see now with technology moving so quickly that there is no way the students, what they're learning today are going to be the skills that they need in 10 or 20 years. So we have to be thinking about how do we create people who know how to learn, and how do we potentially, I think your point is right, create technologies that can serve as the co-pilots as they are learning new skills and help support them in developing those skills as they're needed. And maybe to lean on them to be able to do things they wouldn't be able to otherwise. So that idea of using the technology to augment human potential, I think is pretty powerful.
How much testing and development do you do before you implement something, or is it just sort of real-time evolution?
Yeah, there's certainly, we do a degree of testing in with students in classrooms. We're lucky enough that aside from Khan Academy, Sal also has Khan Lab School that he started, which is a in-person lab school in Mountain View. They were our early testers in very early beta days of developing Khanmigo. They are very good at giving us critical feedback of what to make better. We also have some districts that we partner with, Newark, New Jersey, and Hobart, Indiana. Both are places where the districts have said, want to partner with you. And so we often are there doing both kind of new things, but classroom observations, interviewing students and teachers about what's working and what's not. And then internally, we do red teaming, where we try to break the things that we have built before and try to imagine what all the crazy things students will try to do before we put it out in the world and see what they do. And then we're closely monitoring the data whenever we're releasing a new feature looking at the chat transcripts to see what students are talking to Khanmigo about and looking at how those interactions are. We have moderation flags that flag things like violence and hate and threats of self-harm. And we're always watching whether there are upticks in those or we're seeing any evidence of that. But the thing we see most is kids trying to get their homework answers and we are always they're very creative in trying to get, we have talked to a historical figure and they talk to Thomas Edison and try to get him to solve their math problems.
Well, a lot of AI these days, as everybody knows, even, our audience is a lot of specialists, but it includes just regular folks who are interested. A lot of AI is used to interpret massive amounts of data in ways that serve a business function. You make the mistake of sending an email to a friend saying you're going to buy a new couch, and all of a sudden everything you see on the internet is couches,
Yes.
for days. Make it stop, right?
And you're like,
But
I already bought one. I don't need another
exactly, exactly right. So, but I think one of the questions that comes to my mind as a result of this is that there's also a kind of that same kind of technology can be used for a diagnostic purpose. So, you could see a kid looking at certain kind of thing, and it actually reminds me, again, because this sort of brought my father to mind. In the early research that they did at Bell Labs, one of the things that they did to see what would work was they tracked eye movements, and they tried to see, what kind of eye movements were related to what kind of learning. They tried to find a correlation, right? Well, of course, obviously with AI, we can go a lot further than that. You could say, oh, this person might be dyslexic, or, oh, this person seems to have a problem with this kind of reasoning. Let's take them in a slightly different direction. How much of that is there, or should there be?
Yeah. So I will answer this question knowing actually my training in educational psychology, I was a school psychologist, which for folks who don't know, school psychologists are not the counselors in the schools. They're the ones who do educational testing to identify students with learning differences and learning difficulties. So with that as my background, I will say that all of those kinds of evaluations are meant to include lots of multiple data sources and bring all of that data together. And to your point, that sounds like what a lot of the AI technology can do. The difficulty is we don't, I think, have enough research yet to really validate what combination of data. Is it the eye movements? What is it that is really the indicator of, say, a learning disability in reading? Which the research starts to show us that it's actually much more about sound symbol correspondence and phonological awareness, not, eye tracking and what that looks like. So what kinds of data would we want to look at? So I think there's not enough research yet on which data we should bring together to do that kind of diagnosis and what that might look like. But it's certainly a place. I see a lot of startups that are trying to get there and trying to get there pretty quickly. It's also a place that is fraught with legal challenges and compliance risk. For good reason, we want to protect these kids and make sure they're getting the best education for them. But it's a challenging space for a startup to navigate.
Well, you could also imagine that in the past, we didn't have as much data as we would get from doing this kind of analysis, right? So, again, don't want to digress too much, but I had a friend once who was a very, very, very successful guy. And, but he found he couldn't concentrate. And so he needed to be in a room, sound needed to be off, one light, he would have to take notes and stuff. And then, like late in his life, his wife noticed that whenever he was supposed to go to the store, he'd pull out of the driveway and turn left instead of right. And then she brought it up to him and he said, it's funny, whenever I go to a hotel, I turn to the wrong direction instead of, but the opposite. He was always right, but he just was, do the opposite. And she said, you should be tested. And then it turned out he was dyslexic, right? And he had gone through his whole life, very successful person, but nobody had ever said that to him. Well, of course, dyslexia is kind of a blunt instrument. That there are probably hundreds or thousands of kinds of dyslexia, hundreds or thousands of little behavioral or learning disorders that people have that we haven't been able to classify because we just didn't have the data. So it would seem to me there's a rich kind of vein of this analysis of how people learn.
Yes. And the thing that he did, because he had lots of other skills, was he developed his own set of accommodations for himself that worked for
Right.
him to be able to be successful and navigate life. And really, the goal isn't to put a label on someone. The goal is to figure out how to best help them succeed at their goals. And in our case, to help them learn the things that they need to learn. And so really the goal is, could we use the data to do that, as opposed to, can we use the data to put someone in a big bucket that, to your point, contains a lot of probably different kinds of people anyway. And so I think that individualization is really a potential of this kind of technology, and being able to work with the individual to help them achieve their goals, as opposed to thinking like, how do we put you in a bucket with a label?
Well, also a lot of that's cultural.
Mm-hmm.
I've literally never brought my father up in this podcast, and this will be the last time I do. But one of the other things that he would say is, in the United States, when he would talk to people about science and math, people would say, well, they have the talent for that, or they don't have the talent for that. And then I'd go to Japan and people would say they have to work harder. And that there was not this kind of, there were cultural differences in the approach to education. Now you guys, have a broad footprint. How do you cope with that?
Yes, so it's a good question. We focus on what are the fundamental things that people need to learn, and one of our taglines is anyone can learn anything. And so, to your point, not everyone believes that. Not everyone says, you know what, you're right. And people do believe both of themselves that they are not good at certain things, and that that the people believe that of kids, and that they're just don't have the aptitude for something. But that message of how to do that is baked into the idea of mastery learning, the idea that if you practice and keep working at something, you will increase your proficiency at that. But if you're fighting against the cultural stereotype, that's pretty difficult in where things are. But we find generally globally that people are open to that idea. Although I was on a seminar last fall where a professor asked me, like, do those liberal arts graduates, students, really need to learn math because they're just not good at it? And I was like, oh, no, they can be good at it. They just need the opportunity and the support to practice it.
I have to say, I've spent a lot of time in Asia, and that question would have gotten the person escorted from the room in some of the places I've been in Asia. It'd be like, no, that's not the issue. Which, again, with the application of AI, what is its personality? What does it take you through? What does it believe in? How do you acculturate the AI to the place where you are, or should you not? Sometimes culture is an impediment. Maybe it can help be it can be an obstacle. Look, I got to tell you, I could go on talking about this, and I would promise I will never mention my dad again. But I really would love to pick your brain, and maybe since we've run out of time here, you will allow us to invite you back some other time and keep the conversation going. Maybe.
Would love to come back. This is what I love, talking about all these topics. So whenever is a good time.
Thank you very much. We'd love to have you back, Kristen. And all of you who are listening, I suspect you would like to come back for that. We'll let you know when it's going to happen. And each and every week here at Scylla Consciousness, we will talk about AI in the broadest terms. And early next year, we're going to launch another AI podcast, which is focusing on a very specific area, AI, climate, and energy. And we may take it from there. So watch out for that one. Come back for this one. And if you want to know about all the other things the DSR Network is doing, go to the dsrnetwork.com. We do 15, 16, 17 podcasts a week on different subjects like this. So join us for those as well. Until then, thank you very much. Bye-bye.